With a never-ending stream of cars on our roads and traffic congestion out of control, cycling is becoming more and more popular. With increasing numbers of bikes and cars now sharing our roads, bike rage is fast becoming the new road rage. An online survey of Queensland cyclists found that over 70% reported experiencing harassment in the past 12 months. But why do drivers seem to rage against cyclists? Tonight, ABC's science show Catalyst takes a look into this rage and where it comes from. For more, I'm joined now by Catalyst researcher Wendy Zukerman. Wendy, thank you for your time this morning. Tell us, where does this rage come from?
Well, what scientists have shown is that the rage that's shown towards cyclists is really coming from the motorists dividing cyclists into an other. They see them as someone different to themselves. And we see this sort of psychological phenomena happening in many different majority-minority divides. So once you start thinking about people as different as the minority, we see a lot of different psychological processes that are universal and quite curious happening. So for example, probably the most common that we see with bike rage is a phenomenon called out-group homogeneity. Now that's a very fancy way of saying you tend to think that cyclists are all the same. You paint them with the same brush. If one cyclist maybe runs a red, you'll hear people say, oh, cyclists, they're always running reds. Whereas if you see a motorist run a red or perhaps speed, then people say, oh, that guy is an idiot. They focus on the individual rather than the group of cyclists.
Is the minority group, which is the cyclist group in this case, always the one painted with that same brush, the always do this, they always do that?
Yeah, when we look at sort of the media portrayal of cyclists, particularly in the tabloid press, we see a lot of these statements like always running red, like maniacs on the road. And so on Catalyst, we wanted to look at the statistics, the studies, to show, are they really maniacs on the road? And actually the studies on the subject show no. So for example, one research paper from Melbourne found that cyclists run reds around 7% of the time. And it was quite a robust paper. They looked at around 4,000 different cyclists. And then so you might think, well, 7%, they are running reds. But then you look at the situation with drivers and they're running reds around 5% of the time. So we can all be a little bit lawless on the road. It's just our tendency to make these sweeping generalizations about the minority group that seems to be driving this sort of really irrational hatred towards people that are just using cycles to get where they need to go.
Is there also a sense of threat in there somewhere?
There doesn't seem to be evidence of that. What there might be evidence of is that people aren't expecting cyclists. So there has been a study to show that there's quite a few sort of look but don't see sort of crashes, which is where drivers are driving and they look and they don't see anything, so they turn, but there's a cyclist there. And it's an interesting sort of psychological phenomena where they're not expecting to see a bike, so they're not looking out for bikes. And then when they do see that bike there, because it's so close and they're sort of exposed to it, then they feel this rage, this, oh gosh, and they're stressed, and then they get excited and they get angry. So rather than sort of a fear of the cyclist, it could be their own sort of stress about the situation, which then gets morphed into a type of rage, which wasn't necessarily sort of the cyclist's fault in any way.
Absolutely fascinating. Wendy Zukerman from Catalyst, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And you can see the full episode of Catalyst tonight on ABC One at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.